Well, hello. Welcome into the Sweat, DraftKings nightly show dissecting daily fantasy and sports betting. Occasional bad jokes, too. You'll get that a lot tonight during this next hour. I'm your host, Brendan Glasheen. Happy to be joined by DraftKings contributors Julian Edlow, Reed Fowler. They're in the building today. And Jeff Ulrich also joins us from north of the border. Hello, gentlemen. How are we tonight?
What about Ian?
Ian Harditz is here.
Introduce all the guests, Clash.
Ian was a late ad. Sorry, Ian.
Joke.
Well, I have to focus on the camera because that's where I belong. We'll get to Monday Night Showdown picks in both Sportsbook and on DFS. Bengals are at the Steelers tonight. 2-0-3 teams. Let's go! And the PGA Tour is in Vegas this Thursday. We'll start to sift through some golfers that you should be playing. We'll also look ahead to Week 5 NFL spreads. Hopefully your season-long teams are still afloat or you've made out okay on your bets through 4 weeks. Let me relay some positivity to you all. It is still very early, but Mondays are for overreaction. Overreaction Monday. We overreact to key storylines from Sunday's NFL slate. At Mile High Sunday afternoon, for example, Leonard Fournette, he exploded for 225 yards against the Broncos, more yards for the Jags back than he had in the first 3 games of the season combined. Sold, was this the breakout performance Fournette needed, and should we expect more of this in these big fantasy days, Jules?
Yeah, it was definitely a breakout performance that Fournette needed. I don't know if we're necessarily going to see these 225-yard games, but I also don't think he's as bad as he's been in these previous games, particularly against Tennessee, where he gained 66 total rushing yards and had a long carry of 69 yards. So really bad game that was just defined on one play on that Thursday nighter prior to this one. So the best thing about Fournette is that he's on the field every play. He gets pretty much all of the running back touches coming out of Jacksonville's backfield. So Carolina, not particularly a matchup that you love for Week 5, but it's also not one that's going to scare you off. So just based on pure volume and Fournette staying in that 6,400 range, he's a guy that we can continue to target in DFS this week. He's a guy that should produce something in between the 60 and 225-yard games we've seen.
Reed, impressed with Leonard Fournette?
Reed's laughing at me. And by between, I don't mean somewhere in the middle. I mean like an average between those two.
Yeah, no,
Stop talking. It's Reed's turn.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you, Jeff, coming to my defense there. I appreciate it. Let's talk about Jeff's Jaguars because Emerson's not here and Leonard Fournette. This is what we've always predicted or projected in those first 4 weeks is that, to what Julian was saying, man, he's getting so much snaps. He's getting 100% of the snaps. He's not coming off the field. Christian McCaffrey is the only other guy that does that. But when you talk about volume, and that's what we need in fantasy football and DFS, 90% of the carries, 90% of the targets, Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette and Alvin Kamara, when you talk about 90% of the targets, there's only a few guys out there that get the amount of volume that these guys get. But the only player to get 20-plus targets, target share on their team and 20-plus carries in terms of that carry share is Leonard Fournette, and that's why we like him. Doesn't matter. Yes, he is. You kind of play those matchups, but Carolina, like Julian was saying, doesn't really scare you. So yeah, I like it.
Jeff, at all encouraged by Fournette at Mile High, and does this lead to bigger and better things for him going forward?
Yeah, you're damn right I'm encouraged. I mean, look, the only reason people were down on Leonard Fournette the first 3 weeks is because everyone knew he was locked into this big role, but he hadn't quite produced. And he still hasn't found the end zone, by the way. But I see nothing but better days ahead here. I mean, they even admitted before the Week 4 game with Denver that they just didn't quite have the practice time. The O-line wasn't really giving him the blocking. You watch the Tennessee game, I think most people realized that it really wasn't Leonard Fournette's fault that he wasn't getting yards. It's just someone was hitting him in the backfield on every single carry. When he gets a little bit of blocking, we see what happens. This is a player who's fully capable of ripping off long runs. I mean, an 80-yard run against Denver last week. He's kind of lucky he didn't get in the end zone in one of those long runs. But Reed mentioned the snap count. I mean, they're mixing in Reichel Armlist a little bit now, the rookie, but that's just to give him a breather, basically. There's basically only one running back with a better sort of role right now, and that's Christian McCaffrey. Leonard Fournette is absolutely, in my opinion, like someone you want to go get in fantasy football if someone's dumb enough to trade him. I think there's more days ahead like we saw in Week 3 for him.
Yeah, maybe more wind-shooing ahead for the Jaguars. Nice dry erase board message today for us. All right, Mr. Harditz, I apologize for not introing you. I've already heard it from the rest of the panel, so why don't you jump in?
It's all good, brother. But no, like I agree with everything these guys said. And look, we were waiting on the yards to come after seeing him play, close to 100% snaps the first 3 weeks. And now we're just waiting on the touchdowns to come, because the good thing with this Jaguars offense is it does seem like they're not going to be awful, which was not something that we knew after week 1 when Nick Foles went down. So, Minshew Mania is taking the entire country by storm, and the guy deserves it. He's extending plays on third downs. He's keeping drives going. He's making this offense in at least average to above average units. So, we always knew Fournette had the opportunity. I think the concerns were, is this just going to be one of the league's worst offenses? And, he's not going to have really any touchdown upside. But I think that's going to come in the following weeks. And, even if Minshew does fall back to earth a little bit, Nick Foles should be back before too long. As long as we keep getting these targets and carries, keep firing up Fournette.
Jeff, are you going Foles or Minshew rest of the season?
Oh, it's Foles as soon as he comes back. Give me a break.
I just want to make sure I got it on tape.
On tape, but the dry erase board, there's an eraser involved, so he can just erase it and it will go away forever. We learned today Mitchell Trubisky will miss Week 5 in London versus the Raiders, and that's at the very least, folks. Trubisky injured his shoulder early in that Bears win over the Vikings. His backup, Chase Daniel, was solid in relief, going 22 of 30 passing, 195 yards, and a touchdown. Am I overreacting by proposing there will potentially be a quarterback controversy in Chicago if Daniel continues to be this efficient, Reed?
No.
No.
No. Chase Daniel is he's one of the best backups, if not for Gardner Minshew currently right now, is because you know what he can do. And if you listen to the presser or his after-game interview, he said it was good. It was good that he had a chance last season to fill in some spots for Trubisky so the offensive line knew kind of his cadence and how he was calling plays and so on and so forth. But if you look at Trubisky, he was a slow starter last year. After week 4, we saw 3 out of those 4 games he threw for over 300 yards. And QBR in 3 of those 4 games was over 100. I think it's nice to think that Chase Daniel is someone that can, challenge a franchise quarterback in Trubisky, but he is their franchise quarterback. We don't like to always predict, first or second picks overall need to be on the field, but it's not just about their play. It's also about how much money that team spends. And so when Trubisky is healthy, when that shoulder is okay, he's going to be their starter.
Yeah, Reed, a $4 million base salary this year for Chase Daniel. Jeff, I know you're a fan of other backup quarterbacks, evidently, early on in this show, we've learned. But what about Chase Daniel maybe taking over?
Yeah, not so much a Chase Daniel fan. I can't say I agree that he's one of the better backups. He's a good game manager. He's not someone with a big arm. Chase Daniel is not going to win you a shootout. And that's the problem. I feel like there could be a controversy down the road, though, because people just love to hate on Mitch Trubisky. And they want to forget the fact that Trubisky basically had this Bears team within 1 field goal of making the conference championship last year. He led the game-winning drive, which was successful until their kicker missed. So there's a lot of sort of revisionist history going on here with Trubisky, in my opinion. He has started slow. And look, it's not like I don't realize that he has to play better than he has the first 4 weeks, but we've seen that his upside is so much better than Chase Daniels that I just don't even know where this controversy would come from. I mean, Chicago is better off with an upside quarterback like Mitch Trubisky, someone who can run the ball a little bit, who has a much bigger arm. Does he need to get better? Yes, but there's no controversy in my mind, but the media could create one, and we'll see when he comes back. We'll see what the record is. Chicago went 1-1 with Chase Daniel last year, so if Daniel can produce a winning record, it wouldn't shock me if there's a bit of a controversy when he comes back.
Yeah, Bears get the London game against the Raiders, then they're hosting the Saints and the Chargers, a couple of home games back-to-back. What say you, Harditz? What do you think about Chase Daniel maybe taking over in Chicago?
It speaks to how bad Trubisky's been this year that for Chase to go out there, score 16 points, average 6.5 yards per attempt, and everyone wants to crown the guy already. I mean, he has started 4 games since entering the league in 2010. My favorite part when Trubisky gets hurt and Daniel comes in is these stats we get to see about all the money that Chase Daniel has made from doing pretty much absolutely nothing other than just be backup quarterbacks in Sean Payton and Andy Reid's scheme. So everyone just assumes that there must be something about him that can be good when he takes over. So I don't really know if Chase Daniel's a good quarterback. He has hardly played in the decade he's been in the league. So I find it very hard to believe that he's been around this long and not gotten, I don't know, one team to give him a Ryan Fitzpatrick-esque bridge to kind of see what he's got for a year. So no, and even if he is better than Mitch, I have a hard time believing this front office is going to allow it to happen when the Bears have until the end of next season to decide if they're going to make Trubisky the next $100 million quarterback. People laugh oh, no way he deserves that, but that's what franchise quarterbacks are getting paid these days. And we saw that with Goff, we saw that with other guys that might not be having the best stretch of ball lately, and the Bears need to find it out with Trubisky. So I really don't think Daniel is anything special to begin with, and I don't think Sunday's performance did too much to change that, and I'd be very surprised if he takes away any snaps from Mitch.
Just remember, backup quarterback might be the best job in sports. I mean, there's not much that has to go into it.
Catcher.
As long as you don't have to play,
Fair.
I mean, God.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. That's why I said it. Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to add to what the guys hit on here. I don't like Mitch Trubisky much. I don't think he's a very good quarterback. A lot of teams would be happy to have a backup quarterback as good as Chase Daniel, but what Ian touched on at the end there is really my main thought. This is a number 2 overall pick, and there's not much of a difference between the two, no matter which one you prefer. So Chicago has to find out what it has in its investment here. Remember, they traded up to get Trubisky and passed on Mahomes and passed on Deshaun Watson. They have to find out what Mitch Trubisky is and if he can improve. So while I don't like Trubisky, he's a guy that I often play, under yardage props on, fade in fantasy at all costs. He's a guy that the Bears are going to explore. So I don't think we're going to see a QB controversy here just based on the investment in Trubisky. But come the end of his contract, look where Mariota is as a number 2 overall pick. He had a big game against the Falcons, but just overall, people don't really believe in him. If we get to this point in a couple years where Trubisky still hasn't improved, then we can start talking about him maybe not getting that $100 million contract and becoming a backup somewhere.
Harditz mentioned the name Jared Goff. He threw for over 500 yards in a losing effort. At least one QB threw for over 500, Julian.
Hey-yo.
Yep.
Granted, the Rams were playing from behind the whole game. Everything good in La La Land for the Rams offense, expecting them to use this game to catapult their pass game moving forward. Why not we go to the guy who thinks everyone can throw for 500 yards? Julian?
Look, I had the right idea. I had the wrong guy.
We always do.
We'll capitalize on another hot take next week. At least I wasn't Steve Buchanan and said that a guy that scored 0.4 fantasy points would lead all quarterbacks in fantasy scoring. So I have that going for me. I'm also not Reed Fowler, who gives Monday Night Football hot takes on a Sunday morning show. That might be even worse. But anyway, moving on to the Rams.
20 minutes later.
The reason that they were in this position is because you blink and they're down 21-0 to the Bucs at home. So they didn't really have an option here other than to sling it. So I don't know if this necessarily will catapult their passing game. If anything, it makes me look at their passing game and question it a little bit more, because the reason they got into this hole was by passing the ball early and Jared Goff making a million brutal mistakes at home. Goff is another guy that I think is extremely overrated. Had a huge season in the right offense with the right weapons, the right coaching, but the mistakes that he made at home against a Bucs team that they absolutely should have beaten, I think that this offense might want to look at getting more conservative or finding ways to, give Goff plays that he's more comfortable with, because those turnovers just can't happen. And if that means passing the ball more, then that means passing the ball more, but it has to be in plays that Goff's comfortable with.
Jeff, what say you?
I mean, look, any time a team throws almost 70 times in a game, you're going to see the next game, they're going to try to throw less than that. I guarantee you will see some more just some run-heavy action from the Rams in their game against Seattle. And it'll probably play out that way just because of their opponent, too. Seattle's a team that still wants to run the ball at their core. Look, Jared Goff, just speaking to him, I mean, a lot of it was circumstance. Obviously, he helped build the hole that they were in. But whenever you're down that much, I mean, you at the very least, I appreciate the fact that Sean McVay is out there trying to win this game, even when they're down by 21 points. Most coaches would not opt to throw that much. Most coaches would have just given up. The Rams almost got back in this game by throwing that much. I think that speaks to the fact that just the Rams are sort of a chameleon and they will adapt. So I think you'll see games like this in the future from the Rams, but I think next week you will probably see them try to run a little bit more. But look, the Rams exploit their opponents. They went a little bit pass heavy because of Tampa Bay. It blew up in their face. I expect next week you'll probably see a regression to the run.
Well, and the Rams got the better end of that Chiefs shootout last year. That was mid-November, but granted we're only in week 4. That was a 54-51 game, a lot closer from the beginning. Ian Harditz, what do you think? Is this a game that the Rams can build off of despite falling to the Bucs?
Yeah, kind of like Jeff was saying, we're not going to see 68 pass attempts every week. I mean, it was tied for the third most in any game ever. So I wouldn't really count on that continuing. But the types of pass attempts did have some room for positivity with it. One, Todd Gurley finally kind of got going in the receiving game. He had 7 catches for 54 yards. Seeing him really get held in check through the air the first 2 weeks of the year. I mean, he had one play where he kind of the guy had to stop him with the defensive pass interference inside the 10-yard line. Otherwise, he would have had a nice little 30-yard wheel route for a touchdown. So seeing him go downfield again, more or less just looking healthy, was definitely a good sign. And then also going into this game, Jared Goff was 34th out of 35 quarterbacks in deep ball rate. Like, they just were not throwing the ball downfield much at all. It was just kind of constant checkdowns to Cooper Kupp all game. And we really saw Robert Woods get going yesterday in that intermediate area of the field. Brandon Cooks helped him check a little bit, but even he was getting loose. I mean, he had a 45-yard touchdown potentially that Goff wasn't able to hit him on. So I think it was a good step in that they really got their big 3 receivers and Gurley going again. So as long as they can even out the run game a little bit too, I think they'll at least have more talent kind of rolling at a higher level throughout the formation.
Reed, anything to add?
Yeah, to Ian's last point, I think that's the main one, is that once we saw Goff's sort of the decline was when we saw Gurley's decline. I think those are really hand in hand, and I think it goes. It's way more important to think that what improves always the pass game is a good run game. McVay's offense predicates on the play action, and we see those formations that are disguised, and it's essentially the same play, but it's play action. And Todd Gurley not going that run game, not necessarily going at the clip that it was last season, I think is why Goff is really struggling in this first quarter of the season. So I think the run game is going to help more so than the pass game if they just pass more so.
All right, get used to these guys. Harditz will be joining us later on. We've got Reed as well as Jeff and Julian sticking around for most of the hour. So they ain't going anywhere. We're going to be with you until the top of the hour. Thank you for keeping me in mind and your thoughts as I deal with them. Monday Night Football sportsbook picks are coming, player props included. The Panel B guys are going to weigh in now, though, on the Bengals and Steelers tonight.
Hey, Taryn and Azak here with your DK Fantasy Flash. Let's talk Monday Night Football. An AFC North rivalry feels a little different this year as the Steelers and Bengals are both winless, and some of the usual big names will be missing in action come kickoff. Ben Roethlisberger is one of those after a season-ending elbow injury, and AJ Green is still MIA on Cincy's side as he recovers from a preseason ankle injury. The 31-year-old shed his boot weeks ago and has been going through workouts, but Adam Schefter reported today that Green is expected to miss at least the next 2 weeks. There could be more here than just his injury, as the 31-year-old is still in a contract year and could be trying to leverage a new deal. With the Pro Bowler missing at least the first 6 weeks, the Bengals might be regretting their decision not to put Green on IR before the season and potentially wasting his roster spot. As for the team on the field, look for Tyler Boyd and John Ross to continue to fill the gap and serve as Andy Dalton's primary receivers until Green gets back into the mix.
You know, Dalton's looked okay, but as you'd expect, his production has been going down week after week. And, you know, the Steelers are nothing special defensively, but I'm just going to keep riding with Mason and Juju. Bengals have been having trouble with slot receivers so far this season, so I think that's a spot that you can try to exploit. But there's really, like, nothing sneaky in this game. Like, I don't see anybody that I'm like, oh, he's probably a good tournament play. This is like, you know, this is kind of another kickers and defense week, I feel like.
Yeah, I think my favorite aspect of this game, though, is just the Tyler Boyd props. His catches are at 5.5. I'll be surprised if that's not 6.5 soon. And then his yardage, receiving yards, 69.5. So
seems kind of
if
low.
we look at tweet from Evan Silva late in the week, teams targeting the slot versus the Steelers, 26 for 29 for 323 yards and 3 touchdowns on the season. That's the spot that Boyd will be lined up in. Boyd's been having a great season in his own right, kind of overshadowed by the weird hot start from John Ross, how good
Right.
Boyd has been. So obviously in your showdown lineups, in your Monday to Thursday lineups, Boyd's the guy I'm getting in there. 5.5 catches, 69.5 yards, like both the overs.
Do we think Minkah Fitzpatrick makes a difference there?
He is apparently playing safety rather than slot corner, and a lot of the time the Steelers' slot corner apparently has been a linebacker, which favors Boyd.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the Warren Sharp where they kept putting a linebacker on Keenan Allen last year, and that did not work out. as well. Auden Tate, I think, is kind of interesting, though, too, for the Bengals. Led the team in receiving last week against the Bills as they took away the slot. They took away John Ross' lid-lifting ability. And Tate's more just that big body, like, red zone target. So, I mean, I think if you're talking like trying to find someone maybe contrarian or just cheaper with high upside, a guy who they just get into the red zone, he's a target there.
All right, we are back. This is not a rerun. We're going to have the same crew. No Hardits this time. No Edlow, Fowler, and Ulrich discussing Monday Night Football sportsbook odds using chase or fade. These are the most intriguing, in our opinion, including James Conner. He is the only player on the board with minus odds to score tonight at minus 139, just to score a touchdown. So chase or fade, Conner finds the end zone tonight. Mr. Edlow.
Yeah, I'm going to fade this. I understand the premise. He is kind of the workhorse back for Pittsburgh. I don't know why Jalen Samuels isn't even getting touches at all. I think that's something the three of us probably actually agree on for once. So, in theory, I understand it. However, Conner's been so bad this year. 34 carries for 97 yards, 26 total receiving yards in the last 2 games combined. If Pittsburgh gets down to the 1, 2, 3 yard line, yeah, they're going to try and hand it to Conner and pound it into the end zone against a Bengals defense that doesn't show all that much resistance. But I don't want to lay minus 140 essentially for a guy that's been that bad this season, scored 1 touchdown out of the 3 games as the workhorse back. So I'm fading this one for sure.
Well, those are some pretty scary numbers, Reed. Are you in agreement with your comrade, Julian?
Rarely. On this one, I agree in terms of the value for Conner at minus 140 is a bad one if you just look at that board. You have like Tyler Boyd, I think has a good shot to do it, but you know what's worse than James Conner right now is the Cincinnati run defense. I mean, they're giving up the 2nd most yards per game, and I know that doesn't translate to this specific prop, but I mean, they're just absolutely horrendous against the running back. And if there's a get-right spot, it's James Conner at this juncture currently, because if he doesn't, and to what Julian was saying, he's getting about 70% of the snaps, and so it's not necessarily bell cow what we saw last season. It's tough to trust someone who hasn't shown much in the first few games, but I think this one is going to be close. Just the value at that top spot is not very enticing.
It's a fair thing to bring up, Reed, because Cincinnati has played Seattle, San Fran, and Buffalo, and some of those teams have had injuries to their running backs, and Buffalo's had a bad situation go on with their rookie, and Seattle's kind of mixed it up. So
thank you.
I kind of like where you're going there.
I appreciate
we'll see if it lasts for the next 38 minutes or so. But let's go to Jeff now.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch this. It mainly just comes down to the odds. I mean, it is a good spot, but you have to remember this is the Pittsburgh Steelers without Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown. This isn't a high-scoring offense. They might only get 1 crack inside the 5-yard line, and then what happens? What if they decide to do a QB sneak or something? Then you're out of luck. I mean, I haven't even discussed how bad James Conner has been, averaging under 3 yards per carry. So you also have that to worry about. I really feel like this is a spot where Conner could get benched. I know Jalen Samuels did not touch the ball last week, but they did talk about him getting some touches this week. And it really feels like Pittsburgh is at a point where if this doesn't start producing, if the run game doesn't start producing, they're going to make a change. So all that considered, not a chance I'm touching minus 140. I'd much rather go to Joe Mixon on the other side, who we know is going to get the ball at least at plus 110. So.
Way to tease the segment, Jeff. We'll get to Mr. Mixon, but I want to talk about these riveting quarterbacks. Second career start for Mason Rudolph. His pass yard total is at 240.5, while Andy Dalton's is 255.5. Rudolph looked shaky in his start last week, but chase or fade that he actually ends up with more passing yards than Andy Dalton, Reed.
I don't think so. If you just look at how both of these teams are schemed up, I mean, like you just mentioned, this is a rookie's first division game. I think it's going to be tough. I think they do hand it off, whether it be Jalen Samuels if Conner sits or if Conner has a big game. And if you just look at Cincinnati and how they design their plays, they're passing it the most. 72% of their plays are passes. Zach Taylor wants to air the ball out. And so it just in terms of volume alone and experience, it's going to be Andy Dalton.
How about you, Jeff? You like Rudolph over the other reindeer we're calling Dalton?
I don't think I'd touch it personally. I don't really love either of these passing props just because this game, it feels like, has so many question marks. At the same time, if I was going to have to choose between these guys, I would definitely go Dalton too, just because of the scheme. that Cincinnati's been running. I do think Cincinnati's going to be trying to run the ball more tonight, and I do think they're going to be successful in doing that. So you could see Mason Rudolph just get in a situation where almost like we saw like a couple Thursdays night with Marcus Mariota, where he's just throwing more late and he surpasses Andy Dalton. I just feel like there's too many question marks to go after the passing totals here. But I think schemes altogether, you got to take Dalton just because of the volume that Cincinnati's been passing at. I mean, Andy Dalton's still on pace for like 5,000 yards. So just 15 yards between them, I would still lean Dalton here.
Chase or fade, Julian?
Yeah, I just echo everything Jeff pretty much said there. I would go with Dalton here on it. I would fade Rudolph having more yards, even at, I think it's up to like plus 130 now. There's a reason that it's moving in terms of more plus money for Rudolph. Dalton, I mean, in the last game, Dalton threw for 250 yards in Buffalo. We just saw how tough of a spot that is. Tom Brady just threw for 150 yards in Buffalo. So if you look at the first 2 games of the season, Dalton's averaging over 360 yards a game through the air there. This Pittsburgh defense is not particularly daunting, especially in playing defense on the slot position, which is where we'll see Dalton's favorite target, Tyler Boyd. So I think this is a spot where I actually do like the over for Dalton if I'm going to play one, and then just leave Rudolph alone.
All right, Jeff said he was into Joe Mixon. He brings up a great point because since he has played Seattle, San Francisco, and Buffalo, all teams with great defenses, Mixon's rushing total is set at 64.5 yards. The over is plus 105. Mixon has not had more than 60 yards in a single game this year, but chase or fade that tonight is the game where he goes over that total. Jeff?
Yeah, I would definitely. I like this one, and especially at plus money. I think if I was going after Joe Mixon prop, I'd probably go rushing and receiving, just because he's the type of player who could rip off a 25-yard screen pass. Then he got a big chunk of that yardage. But I don't mind this rushing prop either. The Pittsburgh Steelers rush defense hasn't been that good. I mean, they're allowing almost 140 yards per game. You just look back at some of the workhorse backs. I mean, Chris Carson ended up with like over 80 yards total yards. Rex Burkhead ended up with over 80 total yards. Joe Mixon isn't just a better talent than those, but he's locked into a bit of a better workhorse role than those players too. I think Mixon kind of got on track with the run game last week against Buffalo, and I really feel like Cincinnati is probably one of those teams who are going to try and regress a little bit back to more running here, and I think this is a situation where they can do it. So, I'm all for the over Joe Mixon props tonight, I guess.
Julian, you referenced how James Conner has underwhelmed to start the year. So are you looking at that the same way you look at Joe Mixon?
Somewhat. I think Mixon has a little bit more upside just because he's a little bit better of a player. And like Jeff said, Connor's role might be in question. I'll believe it when I see it in terms of Jalen Samuels getting plugged in there more for Connor, especially the 0 touches last week scares me. But with Mixon, we know that there's no threat. Gio Bernard is obviously a solid backup. He's going to get 5, 6, 7 touches. But Mixon's locked into a role, and it's a good role against the Steelers defense that's not very daunting. So, I think this is a really good number, and when you're in that spot, you lean with the over because of the plus money here. But if I'm playing a player prop on the Bengals, it's Tyler Boyd over 69.5 yards receiving. That one's already gotten juiced up to minus 162, but the Steelers, one of the worst slot wide receiver defenses in the league. They often wind up with linebackers covering the slot receiver for some reason, and Boyd's been really good so far this season. So that's the Bengal that I'm targeting for player props.
Again, the over is plus 105 for Mixon. Reed, are you into it? Chase or fade?
I'm gonna fade this, and these guys are saying that Mixon is a better player than Connors, and I think he is from a overall standpoint. And to what Jeff was saying, these guys had gone up against Pittsburgh. You're talking about total yards. This is a rushing prop, and when you look at Mixon, he's only seeing about 60 to 65% of the snaps. Like Gio Bernard is not as good as Mixon, but he's still getting mixed in. And again, I go back to it. This scheme we just talked about, why we like Andy Dalton. That should also work against Joe Mixon. I know last time these teams met, he went 13 attempts for 105 yards, and so when we just look at the numbers and the talent that's there, absolutely. But this is an entirely different scheme. It's an entirely different offense under Zach Taylor. I'm a little scared. I think total yards, I think he gets more in the receiving category, but this one is tough because Pittsburgh, although they're bad holistically as a defense, their rush defense is a lot better than their secondary.
Let's look at this game from a big picture perspective now. The point total is set at 44.5. Both of these teams are averaging under 20 points per game this season. So, chase or fade that this game will go under that total. Jules?
Yeah, a trend that we've been seeing so far this season is a lot of these primetime games going under. And look at Sunday Night Football. That was a game we thought might have some points in it between the Cowboys and Saints there, and we wind up with 22 points. So I don't really, we've been talking about how bad these defenses are, and we might see a lot of yardage, but we also haven't seen these offenses capitalizing and turning it into points. So I think even if we get this yardage, these teams get into the red zone, we're going to see a lot of field goal attempts. I think that I would lean with the under on this one.
Reed?
Yeah, same here. I think these teams early on in the game are going to go run heavy. Even though we like Zach Taylor in that pass offense, I think both are going to focus on the run. So under.
And Jeff?
I want to make a case for the over, but Pittsburgh's 6-2 as home favorites, hitting the over in their last 8 games. But again, that's such a different scenario with Ben Roethlisberger. I'm going to take the under here too. Pittsburgh and San Francisco barely went over last week. Now we actually have a bigger number at 44.5 than it was between those two teams. I think feel pretty good at hitting the under. These are two of the worst teams in terms of red zone conversion percentages as well, both bottom 10 teams. So, yeah, I take the under 44.5.
And it makes sense why they are both 0-3. That's not all we've got for you as it pertains to tonight's game. We will have showdown contest analysis and picks. We're going to switch gears to golf momentarily. We'll kick Julian out of here. Earlier today, Adam Levitan and I did our weekly chat, and we found out who we missed on. Hey, I'm Brendan Glasheen, and this is Who'd I Miss On with Adam Levitan. This is a highly rated segment in which we recap Levitan's misses from the NFL Sunday main slate. Just 4.4 DK points for Redskins wide receiver Paul Richardson. Makes sense why you liked him, Levy, heading in. No Terry McLaurin, but the real kick in the you-know-where was the Skins' turn to Dwayne Haskins, who struggled mightily in his pro debut.
Yeah, I think anytime you're dealing with a team as bad as the Redskins, there's going to be a really low floor. It doesn't really matter who is out, who is in. You know, Paul Richardson is a middling player at best. So I think that once Terry McLaurin was ruled out, yeah, Paul Richardson maybe sees a couple extra targets from a projection basis, but the team is just so bad they can't even overcome a really bad Giants defense. So I just think the team in general is what went wrong there.
Now, Levy's misses in this segment can include guys who went off, who were just not on his radar, like Leonard Fournette. The Jags' backfield hammer has basically been on the field for every offensive snap, so why'd you stay away? Was it the Denver defense that scared you?
Oh, I mean, I was well aware of Leonard Fournette. I've lost so much money on Leonard Fournette over the last couple of years. I just couldn't take it anymore. And, of course, this was the spot where he just absolutely capitalized on all that usage. We know that when players, doesn't matter how talented they are, the offensive line situation, et cetera, when players are going to touch the ball 20 to 25 times a game, this is always within the range of outcomes where they can just absolutely go ham. I'm surprised it happened at Denver, but, you know, that's always a risk when you don't play someone with that kind of usage.
And finally, that Bucs-Rams game was wild. I'm sure a lot of people hoped they were on that game. Chris Godwin played a huge role in that Tampa offense's explosion. 44.2 DraftKings points, 12 of 14 targets. He reeled in for 172 yards and 2 touchdowns. You were not on Godwin earlier, so how stunned were you by this performance?
Yeah, and I always want to play Chris Godwin. I love Chris Godwin. The problem with this was he came in with a hip injury, which seemed like it was somewhat serious. And also, I just did not expect Tampa to be able to go out to LA and put up that big of a number on the Rams. I just think it's a reminder that when we have two good offenses playing each other, they can kind of combine for fireworks. It doesn't really matter what we think about the defense or anything else. Two good offenses going head to head can always create that kind of shootout. And Chris Godwin, you know, sometimes guys are injured and they play through it and they're perfectly fine.
That is who Adam Levitan missed on in week number 4. You can find his coverage on DK Live, the DK Playbook, and find him on Twitter at Adam Levitan. We'll catch you next Monday, sir, to see who you missed on in week 5.
Okay, thank you.
Let's talk some golf, shall we? The PGA Tour travels to Las Vegas this week. The Shriners Hospitals for Children Open at TPC Summerlin. It kicks off Thursday. We kicked out Julian for obvious reasons, so let's go to Reed the Green Fowler. And Jeff, I don't have a golf nickname, Ulrich. They are sticking around because they offer what's called versatility to this program. PGA, for better or worse, should these opening odds be better or worse for the following golfers for this week's action in Vegas? All right, Reed, Brooks Koepka has the best odds to win at plus 950. Should they be better or worse?
I can't get any worse than this for us. I mean, plus 950, we all talked about it last season, that Brooks doesn't need really any statistical category or stats to pop in the models that you're running to really do well. One thing that you do worry about Brooks, though, last season when his putter went, he didn't really have any good finishes. And that's really, we think that his distance catapults his good rounds. No, it's his putter. And even when we look at his history here, he's got a couple missed cuts, but he also has a top 5 and a runner-up. And in those runner-up finishes, he gained, I think, about 3 strokes putting or just under that. And so when you look at Brooks, if he's putting really well on that first day on Thursday, he's going to have a solid shot at winning this tournament. But plus 950, it's going to be tough because this field isn't as weak as it has been in the past. It actually has some big names. So it can't get any worse for us than this at plus 950.
Jeff, your feeling on Brooks Koepka?
Yeah, I mean, at first glance, this probably feels like pretty good odds for Brooks Koepka and just like a regular sort of fall series event. But we alluded to the strength of the field. It is a stronger field. And with all these younger players coming in with such good form, I don't think I can quite click the button on Brooks this week. I mean, this event isn't really one that's going to cater to Brooks's power game at all. It's not like those major championship venues like Bethpage Black where, him hitting it super straight and long off the tee is going to make a huge difference. It's at altitude. It's a shorter course. It's basically irons and who can putt the best. And Brooks is certainly capable of it, as he's done a couple times here, finished in the top 5. But there's certainly people with much longer odds than I'd like it for Brooks. So is he deserving to be the favorite? 100%. I'm still not really that interested in Brooks Koepka betting outright this week.
Jeff, we'll go right back to you. Patrick Cantlay, he won 2 years ago and then was the runner-up 1 year ago. He's at plus 1,100, good for second best odds. Should they be better or worse?
No, I think these could almost be. I think Patrick Cantlay could almost push for like a co-favorite in this role. I mean, he's someone who did play last week, and even though he was only T40, he was 13th in strokes gained tee to green. He just didn't sink any putts. He was basically bottom of the field in putting. And the thing is, we're switching venues here. It's nice bent grass greens that Patrick Cantlay has putted very well on the last couple of years. Obviously, he's gone win. He probably should have won last year, but he got caught at the end by Bryson DeChambeau. So he's the player who's almost won the event back-to-back anyways. He's played well at this time of year. He's just a very quality player. And like I said, I think he could actually push for a co-favorite given his recent form. So at plus 1,100, I like this. I like this price a lot better if you go into the top of the board for Cantlay.
Pushing for a co-favorite. Reed, similar feeling or other way around?
Yeah, no, look how he finished last year as well. Not just the course history, but he played extremely well leading up to the FedEx Cup playoffs. And what we liked about, or what we didn't like about Cantlay was that his short game and his putting was always off, but his ball striking was fantastic. And that's what you need at the Shriners. It's ball striking. It's off the tee, it's its approach, and then obviously putting. And when you just look at Cantlay's game, yes, the short game hasn't really been there over the last few tournaments, but it's gotten a lot better. This course can be susceptible to weather, so right now you got to check the weather reports. Jeez. But just look at Cantlay and his ability to hit his irons. You really like it. That's why he does well here. At plus 1,100 still, there's guys out there in this field that can really pop. And in this swing season, right, too, we've seen these guys at longer shots. Look at Cameron Champ. He won last week. We've seen these guys at longer shots win these tournaments because of how the course is set up. So, yes, co-favorite, yes, second best, but still not one I'm going to attack.
All right, let's go to a couple more. These are a bit more of a long shot picks, but Tony Finau is at plus 2,000. Reed, better or worse?
Of course. This is like Jeff's Gardner Minshew and Jacksonville Jaguars take. You always got to play Tony Finau. Outright bet at plus 2,000, no, because he hasn't won since 2016 in the Puerto Rico Open, which is still considered a win, but it's not necessarily a win that we put a lot of weight on. What we always like about Tony Finau is that he's great at ball striking. Over the last 24 rounds, he's number 1 in strokes gained total, top 5 in tee to green, but he cannot putt. And that's always the thing with Tony Finau is that he cannot putt. Bent grass is no different. He just struggles. He struggles with his putting. He changes putting grip a little bit towards halfway through the season. Let's hope that comes to fruition here. At plus 2,000, no. DraftKings, absolutely.
Reed, it's Winshew, remember? Not Minshew. Winshew.
2 W's now because he's won twice.
Winshew. Winshew.
Winshew.
Oh.
There you go.
All right, Jeff, go ahead. Floor's yours.
Yeah, I mean, Finau's a nice player, obviously. The thing is, he's priced up a little bit because he finishes so high so often. And you just look at this field. I mean, some of the names sitting at like plus 4,000. I mean, Byung-Hun An, who's come really close at some of these events lately. Scotty Scheffler, who's first in strokes gained tee to green on the admittedly very short season so far. But even Ches Reavie, who we like last week, I think sets up much better for this venue than Tony Finau. So Finau coming in off, played the Alfred Dunhill Links last week too. So he's coming in off a long plane ride, which really doesn't make that big a difference. But, at plus 2,000, it's just not long enough odds. There's just too many other players. And like I said, this is a deeper field than we're used to at this time of year. But there's too many other players at better odds that just have my eye over Finau.
All right, last one. Hideki Matsuyama is plus 2,200. Jeff, feelings on Matsuyama?
It's pretty much the exact same thing I said with Matsuyama. I think I like Hideki maybe a little bit more than Tony Finau because he, again, towards the end of the season, he looked like he was so close. And I know he missed the cut last week, but we're able to give these guys one little break here. And we're getting a little bit of an odds boost. I mean, Hideki Matsuyama plus 2,200 versus like Bryson with a little bit lower odds. I don't hate, but I'd much rather even just go up to 2,500 or 2,200 or whatever Colin Morikawa is at on the sports book right now. I kind of like him a little bit better. Or those other names I just mentioned. I just feel like there's better values out there for the need to bet Hideki Matsuyama this week.
All right, and Reed?
Yeah, Morikawa at plus 2,800. I think that's a solid play. Look at Webb Simpson. If we want to talk about guys that are in that same odds range, Webb Simpson, a guy who's done really well at this course. I mean, this is sort of tailor-made for a guy like Webb. But with Matsuyama, it's sort of the same thing, right? He doesn't really win. He's inconsistent. And when he does well, it's like you always have to play Matsuyama because you can't really pinpoint the days or the tournaments that he's going to do well. He's such an extremely elite ball striker, but just can't get that putting going. He can't close out tournaments. And so at an outright bet, I don't think so. I mean, we talked about it. Jeff mentioned Scotty Scheffler at plus 5,500. This guy's been playing fantastic in this short season. But when you talk about odds and value, give me Scheffler at plus 55, or if I want to go down, give me Webb instead.
All right, looking forward to the Shriners Hospitals for Children Open getting started on Thursday. We have showdown picks for Bengals and Steelers. That one at Heinz Field later tonight. That is on the way once we hear from the Panel B guys. Julian's out of timeout.
The biggest thing is going to be the bullpen. Mm-hmm. And, I think this could end up being a low-scoring game until we get to those later innings because, realistically, you want Scherzer to go as deep into this game as possible.
Sure.
Because you obviously can't lose this game. And you cannot trust that Nationals bullpen. Like, we've seen how many times they've blown leads. We've seen how many times we've given up, those big runs at the end of the game. But they might be able to do enough against Woodruff, who we really don't know what we're going to get, that it's going to matter. So this is a tough one to figure out because it's like a perfect matchup because, the Nationals definitely have the advantage in the beginning of the game where the Brewers have the advantage at the end of the game. So I hate to be like that cliche, well, you got to score first, but it's like that's so important in this spot
I think
here.
so.
It really is to get that early lead.
I'm not going to argue with how important scoring first in one game playoff is, but
you know what I mean, though.
I'm saying I agree with you there, but I'm just going to say maybe the bullpens aren't as important as you're implying because in these games we know how teams use their pitchers. Like, you got to use what you need. So, who's to say if, and I don't know when the last time Strasburg pitched, but who's to say if this is a 4-3 Nationals game in the ninth inning, Strasburg's not going to close this game, for example.
Right.
Like, teams are going to use their players differently because you have to win this game. It doesn't matter if Strasburg now has to start game 2 instead of game 1 of the next round or whatever, because you have to win this game. So I just think that the personnel, including pinch hitting, when you're going to use pitchers, how long you're going to use pitchers, is just all so different that I want to put some weight on the Nationals, finishing the regular season dead last, 5.66 bullpen ERA in baseball. But that might not even matter if they throw the right guys to win this. If Scherzer can give 7-8 innings and then they throw the right guy to close this game.
I'm Tara Lenizak, and with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash, Clippers fans will have to wait a little while before they get to watch Kawhi Leonard and Paul George take the court together. George says he will miss the rest of the preseason and will likely be out until November as he continues to recover from off-season surgeries he had on both shoulders. George told ESPN on Sunday, as of now, I'll be out of October fully, but who knows? We'll see. In the November range is our target date. LA plays 6 games in October, and their could be getting more breathers as the year goes on. The key to this Clippers season is to keep George and Leonard healthy and have them at 100% come playoff time to make a run at an NBA title.
Do you think that the return of Kareem Hunt, when he eventually comes back, is going to take away from Nick Chubb? Because I don't know if it is. Like, I don't know how much Dontrell Hilliard we'll see when Kareem Hunt comes back. But going away from Nick Chubb at this point just seems insane.
No, I mean, at least it's still early, but I mean, he has a legitimate chance of leading the league in rushing yards. And obviously, yesterday he certainly helped pad the lead there, but it's just, I just don't see it with Hunt. Like, it's very similar to the Eckler Melvin Gordon role. Maybe we see more of like a 70-30 to start out. I mean, it's going to be so late in the year because I think when Hunt comes back, then they have a bye. So I don't think he's even back until week 10. So, I mean, Chubb is by far the more talented back, I think, comparing the two right now. Obviously, we haven't seen Hunt this season. Can't say that. But even just going back from last year, Hunt was in such a different offense that he's going to be in this season. So I like Chubb so much more here. Like, I actually have Hunt stashed right now just because I took him as like a late, last round flyer.
So if that's the case, then you are concerned.
I mean, there obviously has to be a concern. I mean, it's not like we're talking about, when Saquon Barkley comes back, are we going to keep seeing the Wayne Gallman? Like, no, that's not even a question. But we're talking about Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt here. Like, he definitely is going to get some looks. He's going to get some touches. But is he going to be out snapping Chubb? Like, I don't see that happening at all. But for somebody who's a nice RB2 complement, I have no problem, keeping Hunt on my bench. Obviously, if it's as a handcuff too as well, that's obviously you can't get one of the better handcuffs in Kareem Hunt.
Maybe. I'm not even he had sports hernia surgery at the end of August, so he should return fully healthy with that rehab. But even just looking at the snap share that Chubb is getting, every week it's between like 60 and 80% depending on how the game flow goes. We saw it in certain situations because the game got out of hand, and even a lot of third downs and passing downs that Dontrell Hilliard was on the field. He actually played 36% of the snaps. That's abnormally high for Dontrell Hilliard, but when you don't expect to beat the Ravens by so many goddamn points, then you're going to end up just doing a bit of different things on the offensive side of the ball. But he was playing a lot of these third downs that I just don't think it takes away from Chubb at all. Like, if he was getting a Christian McCaffrey 100% of the snap shares, I would say that, yeah, it's going to impact his overall fantasy numbers. But, like, Hilliard's stolen 2 touchdowns already from Chubb at the goal line this season. Now, he didn't really steal the one against the Ravens. Chubb just wasn't playing. But in week 1, he did. So Hunt will steal a touchdown here or there. Like, I don't think that Hunt has a whole lot of value outside of a handcuff. Like, if he's not going to be back for another 6 weeks at least, I don't see the point of having him on your team unless Chubb gets hurt.
Right. And, obviously you would have him there because if he does get hurt, obviously, like I said, he's probably one of the better handcuffs in the league when he's healthy. When he's playing. But, yeah, I mean, Chubb just absolutely has a stranglehold on this offense here on the RB1 duties. Like, I want to like Chubb more because of how good, this offense can be. Not how they've been so far, how they can be. But, if Hilliard's not going to be a factor here, but I just have him, like I said, just as a handcuff, but I think it just might be nothing more than that.
Yeah, he's probably not worth owning if you need the bench space right now, to tell you the truth. The other guy...
No, I would not be... if you need the bench space, he's a drop. Like, that's definitely not a question. But if you have the bench space to spare, then there's no problem keeping him on your team.
Alrighty, we're almost at the finish line, and we're all getting pretty sick of each other. I'm Brendan. I've got Julian, Reed, Jeff, and Ian Harditz all in the DraftKings studio, all on your screen. Wow, let's bring this sucker home with Monday Night Football Showdown picks. The 0-3 Bengals, the 0-3 Steelers. What a juicy showdown contest we have for you. Cincy, by the way, I'll remind everybody, has lost to Seattle, San Fran, and Buffalo. Pittsburgh has dropped games to New England, Seattle, and San Fran. So some common opponents over these first 3 weeks. Let's start with a captain pick. Julian, I know you're a captain of this ship oftentimes, and you like to be in charge, so I'll let you go first.
Wow. Thanks for pitching it to me, Brendan. I'm going to be captaining Tyler Boyd in this game. I just think he's in the best spot of any player in this game. We spoke earlier in the show about how bad Pittsburgh has been in terms of defending slot receivers. 26 of 29 targets have been caught in that position for 324 yards and 3 touchdowns. That number from Evan Silva on Twitter. Tyler Boyd's going to line up in that slot for the majority, if not all, of this game. He's had at least 10 targets in every game this season. He's had at least 60 yards in every game this season, and he's averaging 17.4 DK points without even reaching the end zone yet. I just think he's in the best overall spot.
And no A.J. Green again, so that's something to consider.
Thanks for updating the news that we've known all season, Glash.
Julian, we get new viewers at different times, so you just have to keep people up to date. That's all that is.
Just woken
Let
from
me do my job, and you can do your job. You analyze it, I'll host it, I'll send it over to Reed Fowler for his captain.
Yeah, you had a nerve. I appreciate that, Glasheen. And yeah, I'm going to join on the bandwagon of poo-pooing on Julian there. And like he just chose my hot take on Sunday. That is his captain pick. So I guess Julian likes to give people wrong information and not just add more value to the show. So if you take a look at Tyler Boyd, great. He's 5th in targets, 4th in receptions, 15 in yards at that position. He's in a fantastic spot. But if you want to go a little bit different, I actually do like James Conner. I like James Conner as a captain in the spot. I think to what these guys were saying, he's not going to be as highly owned. If you just look at the position that he's in this game specifically, 70% of the carries go to him. And so if you're not going to go Tyler Boyd, I think James Conner would be a nice one to pivot to.
All right, someone else potentially, Jeff, or similar feelings of these two?
Just so viewers know, we sent someone to the moon at some point too, okay, in case you missed that. My captain is Joe Mixon. I talked about him all show. I mean, look, you look at the Steelers' defense. They've been giving up 80 yards plus to opposing running backs. And Joe Mixon is still sharing a few snaps with Gio Bernard, yes, but he's locked into a bigger role than any of these other backs. You had Matt Breida sharing snaps with 2 other running backs. Chris Carson getting eaten up by Rashad Penny. I think this is a spot where Mixon could potentially just go off with 20-plus touches, over 100 yards and a touchdown. So I do like the Bengals in this matchup. I think they're very live to win this outright. They have the one with the veteran quarterback. They're not necessarily banged up or losing a superstar or in all sorts of turmoil. Most people expected them to be bad. So I think Mixon can definitely find some legs here. Definitely improved the running game last week, and I expect it to carry over here.
All right, Ian Hart, it's a captain play.
Yeah, I'm on Boyd too, but you guys should get the gloves out at that studio. There's some feistiness going on there. But yeah, I'm on Boyd. Same reason a lot of these guys. But look, this is not some new thing that the Steelers can't guard slot receivers. I mean, this has been happening for the last 18 months. Once upon a time, they tried to guard Keenan Allen with a linebacker for almost the entire game. And, they made that trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick, and it seemed like maybe they were finally listening to fantasy Twitter after all these years. But they're playing him just as safety right now, so they're still kind of letting Mike Hilton get abused in the slot. He'll make some nice plays on blitzes and then run support. But, I keep firing up Tyler Boyd. The John Ross kind of start the season, I think, might have fooled some people into thinking he's their number 1 receiver. But it's always been Boyd, and I think he's in a really good spot here.
Tyler Boyd to 2 of you. Okay. How about a value play, Reed?
It's going to be Nick Van Nett. I think when you look at Vance McDonald being doubtful and Mason Rudolph, again, making his first rookie start this division game, Nick Van Nett is going to be very low owned. He's just coming on board very recently at $4,200. Your rookie quarterback might want to have a nice little security blanket for their tight end, so Van Nett.
Vance McDonald has been ruled out for tonight's game against the Bengals. I got my DK Live news alert. How about that on the cell phone? Thank you, Reed. Jeff, your value play.
I'm going to go with Jalen Samuels. And again, I know he didn't get any touches last week. He was still on the field for over 25% of the snaps. And you look at the matchup tonight with the Cincinnati Bengals linebackers, who are perhaps like the worst group of linebackers in the league, or they definitely grade out towards the bottom 2 or 3 groups. This is a fantastic matchup if the Steelers were actually smart enough to deploy Samuels in a receiving role, which is traditionally what he does best. And certainly is a better receiver than James Conner. So I do think the Steelers are going to start to try and use him tonight in that role, because what do they have to lose at this point? I think that under 4K, he's definitely one of the values on this slate. And again, he doesn't need to do a ton to pay off, but he does have that upside that he could definitely get in the end zone, catch 4 or 5 passes, and really, really pay off.
Harditz, you have some value?
I like Alex Erickson, only 800. I wouldn't expect a ton. It's definitely a 0-point floor play, but at the same time, he has been locked in as a number 4 receiver. They've had Willis and Auden Tate kind of rotating as the 3 over these last few weeks. But Erickson, when they're in 4 wide receiver sets, he's in the slot. So all those nice things we said about Tyler Boyd will also apply to Erickson for 15 to 20 snaps this game. And also you can stack him with the Bengals defense and special teams. Maybe the guy busts a punt return for a touchdown. Crazier things have happened.
All right, Julian, value.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at both of the kickers here, $3,600 and $3,400. We spoke about how we think the ball is going to move a little bit in this game, but we were all kind of leaning on the under. So I think it was Jeff that mentioned both of these teams are bottom 10 teams in the NFL when it comes to red zone efficiency. That means when these teams get down there, they're going to be getting some kicks that are in very makeable distances. So I think at $3,400, getting one of these kickers in your lineup, whichever offense you feel you like better, is a spot that you can get 10 or 12 points, and that's pretty valuable.
All right, let's move on now to a player or players that you are totally not touching, you are fading, and that could be quite a few considering we have two very stinky football teams. So let's go to Jeff first on this one.
Yeah, I mean, again, you kind of hit it there. These aren't the two greatest teams. We don't have a massive point total, so I don't think there's any shame in fading some of these high-priced guys. And I'll pick on Juju Smith-Schuster here a little bit. It's not necessarily that he's not good or that he doesn't have a good matchup, but look at the other wide receivers on Pittsburgh right now. James Washington, Deontay Johnson. This is a Cincinnati Bengals team who've given up a lot of big plays, and it's quite possible that it's just one big play to Washington or one big play to Deontay Johnson, and that's where a lot of this offense goes, and those are the players you need, and not a really, really highly priced Juju Smith-Schuster, who, quite frankly, just did not see that many targets last week in a similar sort of game, so with Mason Rudolph. I don't mind fading him. Obviously, it could work against you, but I do like going with those other Pittsburgh wide receivers over Schuster tonight.
Ian Harditz, similar approach to Jeff. You're looking at some of these top-tier guys, and you want to stay away?
No, I like Juju in the spot. I think he'll be fine in the slot. And honestly, like, they want him to be their number one receiver. He's too good not to kind of get those targets coming back his way here in upcoming weeks. I'm not going to be on Deontay Johnson as much. He had the long touchdown last week, but literally, like, just Jason Barrett stopped running on the play. It wasn't like he made some sick double move to get free or anything like that. I think James Washington, even though the targets haven't been slanted towards him, he will emerge, former Mason Rudolph roommate, as we've all heard a million times. I think he will emerge as the offense's number 2 pass catcher. And that leaves Deontay Johnson as the number 3 and maybe even number 4 in any given week if the tight end or running back decides to get involved. So not enough volume there, and I do think his ownership could be a bit higher just because of his early success in the offense.
How about you, Julian?
I think you can make the case to fade either of these Pittsburgh running backs. Maybe you like one more than the other, but James Conner is a high-priced guy who just hasn't been good so far this season. We talked about him earlier in the show. 34 carries for 97 yards. Yes, it's going to be his best matchup yet, but I don't know if we can trust him. And then if you do want to pay down for value, I like where Jeff is going, and some people are going to click that game log and see zeros from Jalen Samuels and just immediately move away from him. And if I was the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would be getting Jalen Samuels more touches, but having him on the field even for a quarter of those snaps and not getting him any touches is just, I don't understand why they did that. Maybe they'll overcompensate for it this week and get him back involved more, but there's also the chance that they just aren't willing to use Samuels the way that they should be, and that has me not really interested in him on this slate.
All right, so both running backs on the Pittsburgh side. How about you, Reed? Anyone you're totally staying away from tonight?
Yeah, it's Tyler Eifert. I think there's some spots where he's performed, but a guy that's never really had a shot to play an entire season over the last few. And just when you look at roster construction and pricing, he's running that spot where you can easily click over. There's some other guys, especially on Cincinnati's team. Auden Tate is a guy that I'm really interested in. He's a big-bodied receiver, 34 or 40 dropbacks in terms of Andy Dalton. He's running routes, and so this guy is someone that they want to get in those three wide receiver sets, get going. He's that A.J. Green replacement, right? His body type is similar, so there's probably some similarity and comfort with Andy Dalton passing to him. So Tyler Eifert is someone that I'm totally fading.
All right, real quick from each of you, I skipped over one of these, so my fault, Julian. I skipped over a question. You each revealed your captain pick. Could you guys give us someone that you'd like to pair with your captain? We'll go around the horn. We'll start with Julian.
Thank you for apologizing specifically to me, Glash. I appreciate
apology.
that.
Not
it was
a
a glaring mistake. I'm going to go, since Tyler Boyd was my captain, I'm going to just be plugging him in with Andy Dalton because that makes the most sense, and I think Dalton's in a spot where he should go over his yardage prop. We saw those big numbers he put up in the first 2 games. He was unable to do it against a good Buffalo defense on the road. I think Dalton's back to a big game here, and his go-to guy is going to be Boyd.
Jeff, 10 seconds, please.
Cincinnati defense with Joe Mixon.
Harditz, you get 10.
Dalton pairing with Tyler Boyd. Give me the Red Rocket.
Wow, you guys like the Bengals offense tonight. Okay. And Reed Fowler, take us home, sir.
For some parity.
You get 15.
Yeah, for some parity, if you want, go with Rudolph Van Nett, and Connor stack. No one's going to be owning that. So if you want to, but yeah, Andy Dalton, Tyler Boyd is a good one.
The four of you were great. I appreciate your time tonight, and thanks for keeping me company, because it does get lonely over here in the host chair. We are back tomorrow at 6 o'clock. We're going to look ahead to Week 5, and we're going to do some spreads tonight, but we ran out of time because Julian and Reed and Jeff and Harditz, they sometimes just talk too much. So we will discuss spreads tomorrow, get you set for Week 5. Have a great rest of your Monday night. The Sweat returns tomorrow night. Bye-bye.